Hello everyone, RBY Overused Guide, Day 3, so we're going through each and every matchup for the lead position. Gengar and Jynx, the sleepers, Starmie, Alakazam, the anti-leads, Jolteon, Zapdos, the troublemakers, Exeggutor, Chansey, the slow sleepers. So if you want to have fun playing this game, just make a new play every game. If you want to be a tournament player, you have to be consistent instead, so you'll do the same things over and over again. Even with that, you cannot allow yourself to be predictable, so you need to have a B plan, at least one B plan in your bag. So let's take a closer look at the intricacies and which moves are reasonable, which are not, and obviously which ones are better and you're trying to use most of the time. The early game is complex, lots of mind games going on, but you want to make reasonable plays. You want to emerge out of the early game, at least without suffering a huge disadvantage, and you want to choose your sleep fodder correctly, even though you have incomplete information. So a few basic mechanisms. You want 2 sleepers on your team. If you get slapped by Exeggutor, you want to go to your own Exeggutor and use Sleep Powder. If they use Stun Spore on your Exeggutor and then explode, you have a backup sleeper, so it's okay anyway. If you don't, that's a problem. Obviously, there are ways around these, but going Exeggutor into Exeggutor is the easiest way. If your Exeggutor gets the first sleep, you might want to land Stun Spore on whatever comes next. In any case, you need to pressure your opponent's sleep fodder, and while Tauros is the tool for doing this, your opponent can switch at any time. So even though going Tauros is a legitimate play, you might want to switch to something that can force the sleeping Pokemon out and spread paralysis. Starmie is a very good Pokemon early. It can threaten Thunderbolt on sleeping Starmie, Psychic on sleeping Gengar, Blizzard on Exeggutor, it can anti-lead Exeggutor, and it can Thunder Wave everything else. It checks Snorlax, it leaves Explosion, and Beambolt Chansey is similar in forcing things out. Sometimes you're going to have to play around Exeggutor's Explosion. Your opponent trying to sleep and boom. Let's start with Gengar. The Ghost is the fastest sleeper, but it has a lot of consistency issues. One might argue that it's better used in the back, but as a lead it has one relevant trait. It gives nightmares to Jynx. Against Jynx you have 2 weapons, Hypnosis and Explosion. And if Jynx stays in, both Hypnosis, granted it lands, and Explosion are bad scenarios for Jynx. There was a time when Jynx was the only sleeper for many teams, and in that case, if you explode, your opponent will not get to sleep at all. The counterplay for them, in case they don't have a backup sleeper, is to go Rhydon. However, one of the main rules for using Jynx is that you want it to be your sleep fodder. So if Gengar players uses Hypnosis, that's a bad situation for the Jynx team. Still affordable, but not good. This is what can go wrong if Jynx goes Rhydon. So this is a tricky situation based on gambles. So all in all, the Gengar player wants to use Hypnosis on average. And well, Jynx player needs to have a backup sleeper. In that case, Jynx can use Psychic, fishing for a miss into a critical hit, into a knockout. That's a greedy plan, but it can work. Most Jynx users settle for Lovely Kiss anyway, instead. Against Alakazam, Gengar has to switch out. Staying in is very risky, like you are going to predict a switch to Exeggutor, which is going to happen more often than not, but in case Alakazam stays in, you're in trouble. If you have Sync Chansey, that's an option, but if the Alakazam player goes Exeggutor, Exeggutor is faster than Chansey. So I feel like going Exeggutor is a good play for both players, and in that case it's quite safe to switch Gengar into predicted Sleep Powder. If you plan to do so, you're safer with a backup sleeper other than Exeggutor, because Gengar is gone to sleep, and your Exeggutor can be stun spored and boomed. Like, that's risky because you have a sleeping Gengar that can predict explosion and switch in, but yeah, even though your opponent is not going to click explosion, that's risky anyway. If you have a backup sleeper like a Sync Chansey, that's even safer. Either that, or you can go for the Sleep Powder speed tie. And I don't feel like the Alakazam player wants to stay in, because if Gengar switches to Exeggutor, most likely Exeggutor is going to use Explosion against Alakazam, trade, and then leave the floor to Gengar. And the Alakazam user doesn't have the anti-lead anymore. And this is actually where a Gengar versus Exeggutor matchup can happen more easily. Like, it's possible even in the lead position, some players lead with Exeggutor, rarely, but it can happen. Exeggutor versus Gengar. This is tricky for Gengar because it's faster, it's going to use Hypnosis, but Exeggutor has a Stun Spore, which can screw up Gengar for good. Anyway, this is a scenario where Gengar has no option really. It wants to click Hypnosis, and in case Hypnosis misses, Exeggutor has Stun Spore and Stun Spore connects. Well, that was supposed to happen. That's just a flaw in Gengar's game, and this is not as likely to happen in Gengar versus Sync Chansey. Thunder Wave is a reasonable play for the Chansey user, but Chansey, unlike Exeggutor, doesn't have a move that can damage Gengar. Exeggutor has Psychic as a follow-up, Chansey has Seismic Toss, so yeah, Seeing has poor accuracy. Gengar versus Chansey is a way better matchup than Gengar versus Exeggutor. Everything with Gengar is tricky, even sacrificing Gengar to sleep is difficult, and this is why Starmie is a great partner for Gengar. Speaking about Starmie, the matchup with Gengar is even trickier for Gengar. Going Exeggutor on turn 1 is risky, because Starmie can use Blizzard, predicting a switch to Exeggutor. So Sync Chansey is the best play, the best switch into Starmie. Even there, Starmie's user can go Exeggutor, so again, Exeggutor against Chansey doesn't look good. So yeah, I feel like Starmie is the lead that gives more problems to Gengar early, because it can also hit Exeggutor, and it's going to use Blizzard against Sync Chansey as well. However, if Starmie uses Blizzard, Gengar can steal the knockout thanks to critical hit Thunderbolt, but that's just too risky. Like, if you know your opponent is going to use Blizzard a lot, there are some reasons for using Thunderbolt on turn 1, but that's very risky. Just like using turn 1 Hypnosis, Starmie's Psychic is extremely dangerous, not as much as Alakazam's, but still. You don't want to suffer a free knockout on turn 1. Electric types aren't better though. Add that Gengar and Rhydon aren't used together, and that's a bad scenario. At least Gengar is faster than Zapdos, but Thunder Wave will punish the miss. So that's even worse than Stun Spore due to 100% accuracy, or 99.6 if you wish. And after Thunder Wave, following with Explosion is quite accidental of a play, not a great plan, and Hypnosis through Paralysis is shaky. Jolteon is even worse than Zapdos because it's faster than Gengar, and unlike versus Jynx, Gengar's Explosion will not knock out. So your best play is to go Exeggutor, and depending on what happens, trade for Jolteon with Explosion. Maybe you can use Sleep Powder if you know they don't have Pin Missile, but yeah, this is risky. You don't want to become too predictable with Explosion, so you're not going to do that all the time. However, if the trade happens, that can be very good for Gengar. Your opponent has just lost their anti-lead, Jolteon. So chances are that Gengar might be the fastest Pokemon. Going Chansey is an option too. So you can trade Thunder Wave with Jolteon, and at that point you have a better status blocker than they do. Then you have to switch Snorlax, Exeggutor. You have to look out for Double Kick, which is always going to be included in Jolteon's moveset. So if you go this route, going through Chansey against Jolteon, you are basically playing into Electric's strengths. You are allowing a lot of stuff, getting paralyzed. Here and there, you need a mix of Chansey, Exeggutor, Snorlax, so you can get out of this Jolteon situation. That's not ideal. Best thing you can do, you go Exeggutor, you use Explosion, and you get rid of it. Or possibly, again, Sleep Powder if they don't have Pin Missile. Gengar Ditto, Psychic is a good play if you have it. Against Chansey you want to get to sleep, so even if you miss. Against a theoretical Tauros lead, just go Exeggutor and click Sleep Powder. Then we have Jynx, which has the safest path to sleep, and Gengar is almost the only thing that puts you in trouble. Like real trouble. Things like Tauros or electric types can be hard as well, but that's a different level. There are ways around, while with Gengar, you're just going for mind games. Lines like Gengar explodes on Jynx, and then they follow with Jynx against your Exeggutor. Like, it's hard to have a counterplay, especially if you have a slow team. They trade Gengar for Jynx, so you go Starmie. Just like I said before, that's because you don't want to switch something else into Hypnosis. Like, on the occasion you're going to switch to Rhydon, and if they use Hypnosis, go ahead. Like, you have to play a game with an active Jynx. That's not the end of the world, but not ideal either. If Gengar misses Hypnosis against Rhydon, that's a different thing. Earthquake is a one-hit KO, so switching back to Jynx is quite safe. Your opponent is not going to stay in and click Hypnosis. So going Rhydon has its merits, and you have to do that anyway sometimes. If they know you stay in all the time, they're just going to explode. Especially if you don't use a backup sleeper. Jolteon is a problem as well. Like, not as much as Gengar, but it is faster, and if you don't connect on turn 1, it's going to follow up with a painful stab coming from the highest critical hit rate in RBY OU overused. Electrode users, please shut up. And if you have Rhydon, you can make a double switch just like before with Gengar. Turn 1, you go Rhydon against Jolteon or Zapdos. Turn 2, back to Jynx. They're not going to stay in, so Rhydon threatens a one-hit KO against Jolteon, two-hit KO against Zapdos, so it's unlikely that they will be willing to risk it. So, and if both players play fair, this might result in a Jynx versus Starmie matchup, but you never know. If they go Exeggutor, that looks very good for you. If you don't have Rhydon, things are different. And they are pretty much the same as with Gengar versus Jolteon. Lovely Kiss works if you connect, but it comes at the price of putting yourself in danger, and that's why electric types are troublemakers. In the lead or in the back, it doesn't matter. And just like with Gengar, you can go Chansey, double switch to Exeggutor and explode. If Exeggutor switches in on a predicted double kick or Thunderbolt, you can allow yourself to click Sleep Powder. They are going to use Thunder Wave first and then Beam Missile, so you have a free turn. Using Blizzard on turn 1, that's not a terrible idea, but it's going to make things quite complicated. With Blizzard, Jolteon is going to fall into Snorlax's Earthquake range, so you can pivot into Chansey, get Thunder Waved, then switch to Snorlax, and at that point they're going to switch out, so you just click Body Slam. Then Jynx versus Zapdos. Zapdos is faster than Jynx as well. On the other hand, Jynx has a 2-hit KO with Blizzard, and Zapdos has a 3-hit KO with Drill Peck, so Blizzard is okay here. Not a fair play, but I think in the long run this is how Jynx is going to dissuade Zapdos from using Thunder Wave on turn 1. If they start with Thunder Wave and you don't FP or you don't miss Blizzard, they are at risk of being knocked out. 2-hit KO. Against Starmie and Alakazam, Lovely Kiss is the standard play. You have the option to go Chansey on turn 1, so you will get a sleep blocker depending on your build and strategy. But this can backfire against Starmie, simply because sometimes Starmie lead means that your opponent has Rhydon, so they are going to switch to Exeggutor, trying to sacrifice it to Lovely Kiss. Against Alakazam, most of the times you're going to click Lovely Kiss anyway. So the tricky part against Starmie and Alakazam will be to protect Jynx from your opponent's attacks. Double Edge Exeggutor is rare nowadays, and that's good news for Jynx. Still, Chansey, Starmie and even Alakazam are going to damage Jynx, forcing rest, and Tauros or Snorlax are going to come in. If Jynx against Exeggutor happens, you might want to consider Blizzard, which is going to 1-hit KO on a critical hit, and you want to do that if you have a backup plan for getting the sleep, so a backup sleeper. And Lovely Kiss is the obvious automatic move against Chansey. Against Tauros, this is tricky for both players and it depends on a random number generator. If Lovely Kiss connects, that's very bad for them. If it misses, that's very bad for Jynx. So, luckily, Tauros lead is very rare. Then we have Alakazam and Starmie, which are similar in anti-leading. Against Gengar you have Psychic. You have to use it sometimes, but most of the times you want to switch out. If you go Exeggutor, that can result in a mirror. So if you have Jynx in the back, that's even better. Starmie can sometimes use Blizzard, trying to predict a switch to Exeggutor. Alakazam's game revolves around using Thunder Wave and pressuring stuff. It beats Starmie 1 versus 1, and you don't want to use Starmie against Alakazam. Your opponent's Starmie can use Thunderbolt and get a critical hit, which is not going to knock out, but it's going to put you in an uncomfortable situation. But even more importantly, Starmie has two major traits. One, it can use Blizzard against Exeggutor, and it can leave explosions. So this is why Starmie is arguably the best lead in the game. And that's also what makes Jynx so good, because it does okay against Starmie. So against Jynx, Alakazam wants to use Thunder Wave, Seismic Toss, Psychic, fishing for a critical hit. Psychic Blizzard Starmie doesn't do a lot. Surf is the best move against Jynx, followed by Thunderbolt. But Psychic Blizzard is usually the best move set for Starmie lead. If the Jynx user goes Chansey, you have to scout for Sing. Talking about Starmie lead, there is a specific team that wants to switch out on turn 1 against Jynx. That team is Starmie Rhydon S4, your sleep fodder, actually is Exeggutor. So your ideal turn 1 is Exeggutor into Predicted Lovely Kiss, and this is the move that somehow saved the team, which was going to struggle against Cloyster. There are, however, two problems. Problem number 1. This depends on your opponent. If they can predict you, they're going to use Blizzard on incoming Exeggutor. And problem number 2 is RNG. Lovely Kiss can miss, so Jynx lead is always going to be tricky for this team. Exeggutor using Explosion against paralyzed Chansey plus a backup sleeper is the easiest way for getting the sleep after Thunder Wave lands on Chansey. If you don't have a backup sleeper, you have to go through Snorlax, and that's more complicated. You save the sleep for later. You are going to use Exeggutor to force Reflect Snorlax out. Alakazam is better against electric types. It's going to use Thunder Wave and Psychic. On the other hand, Starmie is in a bad position. Again, just like with Jynx, if you have Rhydon, you can make a double switch. Against Zapdos, Thunder Wave or Blizzard are somewhat okay-ish if your opponent uses Thunder Wave on turn 1. This way, you can punish a turn 1 switch to Exeggutor by your opponent. Unfortunately, Thunderbolt crit is a 1-hit KO, and they are sometimes going to use it. So if you don't have Rhydon, your first answer is Chansey, and that's tricky. You need to use Thunder Wave, then switch out, switch things around a bit. Hyper Beam and Self-Destruct can help. Electric types, we have talked about them before. If you can predict a switch to Chansey, you want to go to Exeggutor, but other than that, you are mostly using Thunder Wave on turn 1. So yeah, this is the situation. The league game is very complex with mind games, and we see players coming out with new stuff, trying to be unpredictable with some off menus, whether it's Zapdos lead or Snorlax or even Moltres, Articuno. Today's video provides you with solid knowledge, but practice is going to make all the difference. So thanks for watching, and see you the next time. We're going to talk about some mid-game principles.